Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining me. Today I am bringing to you guys another part in my interview with an author series, and today is a traditionally published Tuesday with author Maggie Platt. Let's get into the questions. Hey Jenna, thank you so much for having me on your channel. It is so fun to be part of this interview series and watch the others that you've already done. And again, thank you for having me. My name is Maggie Platt, and I am excited to tell you all about my upcoming novel. It is called Kingdom Above the Cloud, and it would fall in the genre of Christian allegorical fantasy. So if you think about Narnia and Wrinkle in Time and those fantasy novels that don't necessarily name Jesus, but it's all about the Christian faith when you dig a little bit deeper and find what's hidden beneath the plots and the characters and all of that. So Kingdom Above the Cloud comes out on April 17th. It's my first novel, and I could not be more excited. It is being published traditionally through Ambassador International, and I just can't wait for the world to get to see it. It's been my baby for a very long time, as I'll tell you about here in a few minutes, but finally the world's gonna see it, and it's terrifying and wonderful, and I can't wait, and yeah, so here we go. I don't think I ever really consciously chose to start writing allegorical fantasy. I have always written a lot. As a little girl, I was always filling journals and notebooks with story ideas and jotting things down, and they wouldn't have been in the fantasy category. They were much more so just everyday life in our world. And so then when I was sitting there after college and I was kind of in a creative headspace and thinking about my faith and about my walk with Jesus, this story idea just popped into my head. And I've always loved books like Narnia. I've already mentioned both Narnia and Wrinkle in Time, and I've mentioned them before because they're my favorites as far as this genre. And so I've always loved other worlds. I'm a huge Harry Potter fan. Anytime you can be transported into another world, it's just so exciting and entertaining. And then when you can learn something from them too, it's even better. And so when I started writing this idea, it was more for a hobby and to express my faith. And I didn't ever realize that I was becoming a fantasy novelist. And so now I can't really imagine writing much else. I'm sure I'll get a different idea eventually for something totally different. But when you think about choosing a genre, this one kind of chose me. Okay, the length of time it took for me to write this one story is kind of embarrassing, and I definitely could not build a career at this rate. So I started writing this story in 2007. I had just graduated from college, and that's around the time when I got the idea. And I would get really passionate about it and work on it a lot for maybe a month, get thousands of words down, and then I would put it away for months at a time as well. And just never really felt like it was done. And I kept getting new ideas and totally changing plot lines, totally changing characters. It's a fantasy world, so I would even totally change how the people worked. When the story started, the people were eternal. They weren't born and they didn't die. And then it was really, really hard to have plot lines and conflicts that mattered when no one could die. So you think about that for a little bit. It makes most parts of books not very interesting when everyone is just safe all the time. And so I made lots of changes and then would put it away for a really long time. And then around 2010, I think it was 2010, so 3 years later, I was working at a church, and the head pastor gave us all the assignment over one summer to really pray about what God had for us in our lives and what we needed to do to be faithful to his call in our lives. And I just felt a very strong calling in that time that I was supposed to spend the next season of my life really working on this story that God had given me. And it was more so for me. It wasn't really for the world. Like, God knew I needed to be processing my faith and my faith journey with him through this world. And so I did something really dramatic. I was in my mid-20s and I quit my job at the church. Hey, everybody at Church of the Crossing, love you. Thank you for sending me off in such a kind way. And I moved to Florida to really focus on my writing. I worked at a travel agency. Hello to all of my former coworkers there. And then after work would go to the local library for several hours every day to work on this story. And that's when I really wrote the bulk of it. And then over the next several years, I just worked on it here and there. And so and even through the editing process recently, I still made big changes. So I'm just somebody that, thank goodness, I finally had an editor who said, hey, it's done. You should stop making changes. So I think I would still be working on it if I hadn't had a very wise editor. Hello, Daphne. So that is the very broad overview of the writing journey for me. I made countless revisions to my story throughout the process, especially before submitting it to anybody. One of my best friends, my mentor, my pastor, his name's Chris. I actually worked for him right after college, and so he was there for the very beginning, and he read a super early version of the manuscript, like back in like 2007 or 2008, and then he read it again recently and told me, I mean, it is not the same story. He doesn't recognize it from the original one. And I believe him. The only thing that is the same is that my main character's name was the name of a character in the first versions. That's it. Everything else has changed over time. And with each revision, I'm not somebody who can just go straight through the whole manuscript and make really great changes all at once and do this really nice, organized, fashioned way of editing. I am like all over the place. I get stuck in one spot, then I want to go check another spot, and oh wait, I said this here. I need to go check if I said the same thing here. I'm all over the place. So it took a lot of revisions, a lot of editing. The finished product looks nothing like the early stages. My publishing journey was pretty long and convoluted, just like the writing process was. I, over the years, was sending it to agents and publishers every once in a while. Didn't really hear back from most of them. And then things really ramped up. In fall of 2017, I went to a writer's conference and I met an acquisitions editor there. And she worked for a publishing house that specifically worked in my genre. So I was really interested in talking to her. And she had already shared with the group that her publishing house was not accepting submissions at the time. But through our conversation, just out of pure kindness in her heart, she offered to take a look at my proposal and offer suggestions. And so I sent her my stuff. I didn't hear back from her for a really long time and assumed she'd forgotten about me, which was fine. And then about a month later, she surprised me and said, hey, I really like your proposal. Could you send me the whole thing? And again, then a little while later, I got just the surprise of my lifetime. And she said, I read this all in one night. I loved it. I loved your characters. I'm going to take it to the rest of my publishing house and see if we can add it to what we're planning to publish this year. And unfortunately, about a month later, she sent the sweetest email, but basically saying that it wasn't right for them at the time. And she could have left it at that, but I consider it one of the greatest blessings that she instead wrote me a super long encouraging note telling me to keep trying, that I had what it took and that my story was good and not to get defeated, and she believed that I would find a home at another publishing house. She sent me a bunch of suggestions and books to read, and that just blew me away as well. If you are a writer and you want to know what she sent me to look at, just shoot me an email, Maggie@maggieplatt.com. It's a really not creative email address, but I'd be happy to share those resources with you as well. And so through that process, I stopped submitting for a while. just out of feeling just really down over getting that close and then it not happening. But a few months later, I started trying again, and I read the books that she suggested, and I revised my proposal to be exactly what was suggested in the book I read, and I started sending. One week I would send to an agent, one week I would send to a publisher, and then the very last day of 2018, I got an email from one of the publishing houses that I had sent my work to, and they said, "Hey, we would like to see your whole manuscript." And a few weeks later, I was signing a contract. So it was actually about 1 year ago, right around this time, that I was signing my contract. So there's been a lot that's been happened in the last year as we've prepared to get this book out into the world, and it's really exciting, and it's been a lot of work, but it's been worth it. So I'm just so thankful for the opportunity that I've had to work with Ambassador International and be traditionally published. I chose traditional publishing mainly because I know that there is so much I don't know. I was worried that if I tried to self-publish, I just didn't have the skills to do it all on my own. And so I'm thankful that I got picked up by a traditional publisher. They've been super helpful. They know what to do, when to do it, and I just don't. And so I think that if I continued to not be successful with a traditional publisher, I might have started researching enough to be able to self-publish. But that was my primary reason. I wanted somebody else to put the book together and find an editor and find a cover designer and all of that. And that's been a wonderful experience. One of the biggest surprises, I think, for me is just how much I needed to learn about marketing. I guess I never thought about that part of it. When you're traditionally published, you still do the bulk of your own marketing. You have to get yourself out there and be willing to find the right people to read your book and get the word out for you. And so I have spent a lot of time over the last year just researching book launches and street teams and how to do ads and all of those things that you don't expect to be necessarily part of the author journey. But marketing yourself, I think no matter what size of publishing house you're with, or if you go self-publishing, marketing is a huge part of what you have to do. The hardest part, honestly, is giving up control. That is the hardest part about being traditionally published, is that my book baby belongs to somebody else. And again, they hired a wonderful editor. Loved working with Daphne. She was awesome. But what if they had hired someone I didn't like? And what if that editor didn't get what I was trying to do? Daphne did. So it was no problem. But and now I'm in that process with the cover. I don't have a cover quite yet. It's in the process. And then the anxiety of going, oh, I have very little control over what my book baby looks like. And so for someone who is cares a lot about those parts of the process and then to not have a lot of control over it, it's been a great exercise in trust and giving those parts to God and going, it's out of my hands anyway. But not being in control is very hard for someone like me, at least. Most rewarding part, gosh, I don't know. I think having a team of people that believe in the story and are working hard to make a great finished product. Wow, it's surreal to know that other people have read the story and are working on this project to get it out to the public like that. That's really rewarding to know that people believe in it and are inspired by it and want other people to read it. That part is really special. My number one piece of advice, if you are wanting to be traditionally published, is for you to do your research. I mentioned earlier that acquisitions editor sent me a list of books to read, and the main one that helped me, this is the 2018 version. There are newer versions, but the Christian Writers Market Guide. This was so helpful to me in just learning the industry a little bit better, and where to send my proposal to, how to send a proposal. That was just incredibly helpful for me. So that would be my number one piece of advice, is to do your research and don't spin your wheels just sending stuff to people, not knowing if it's what they want to see. Follow their submission guidelines. If they don't have submission guidelines, go to that book. Here it is again. And just really do your research so that you're putting yourself out there in the best way possible. If I could go back and give myself advice when I was just starting out, it would have been to spend more time and be more devoted to this project. At the same time, I think all of my life experiences along the way have really impacted my writing. So God probably just knew I needed to wait until this time to be published. But I do wish when I was younger that I would have taken writing as a serious possibility for a career and worked towards that, rather than now juggling a career. And I work at an awesome Christian school, Anderson University in Anderson, Indiana. Everyone should go there. But I work at this awesome school and it's wonderful, but I am juggling a 9-to-5 job and my writing work at the same time. And what would life look like now if my whole life, as I've had this passion for writing, if I had just gone for it right away? So I wish I had boldly followed into what God had for me in writing earlier, but it's never too late. Yes, you are right. My writing journey is very intertwined with my health journey. I was diagnosed in 2015 with a pretty serious form of cancer. We caught it when it was at the very end of stage 3 before it would have gone to stage 4. So I was incredibly lucky, blessed, whichever one you want to call it. But it was still really scary for a while. I had malignant melanoma, which is skin cancer. And I think what I didn't know before that journey was just how dangerous some types of skin cancer are. It is a very deadly form of cancer. And it had already spread to my lymph nodes. And so it was scary. I went through 5 surgeries and a year of what's called immunotherapy, very similar to what you think of as chemotherapy. Sat in an IV chair and had hours of chemicals going into me, and then felt really sick afterwards. And so the cancer journey, I should always end this story with, I'm doing great now. They don't really call it cancer free, at least in my hospital. They call it no evidence of disease. So I am NED, no evidence of disease, and I have been for a while. And in fact, this coming fall, I will be celebrating 5 years of being NED. And at that point, my doctor is confident in saying I'm no longer an oncology patient. And so that's wild that I will stop having checkups with him and stop having scans. Right now, I still do full body scans every 6 months to just see what's going on in there, make sure that melanoma hasn't spread anywhere. So, but during that process, I mean, my faith deepened so much. I did work a lot on my writing in that time. And yeah, and so as I write with that experience, it just totally changes my understanding of suffering, and it changes my understanding of faith in the face of really hard things, but also it changed my understanding of just pure love that I felt both from God and my family and the people around me. And so it is impossible to separate my writing experience. When I write about faith and write about those things, it's impossible to separate it from that cancer journey and the places I've been in the last 5 years. I think that my diagnosis affected my goals mainly in that before diagnosis, I wasn't working super hard on the story. And then this is going to get a little morbid, but thinking about death and the possibility that I wouldn't be around for very much longer, it just made me really want to finish getting this story out of my head and my heart, and get it out to people if that was possible. And I had ideas for sequels. I still do. I'm working on that now. And really thinking about that we're not promised tomorrow, and I had a very real threat to my tomorrows. It made me work a little bit harder and a little bit faster on the story to get it out there. And again, I'm so blessed that I am where I am now, and I'm not truly a cancer patient anymore. But I hope I still live with that mentality of we aren't promised tomorrow. Let's do what God has for us today. So the inspiration of the story. I was sitting there in 2007 and I got this sudden inspiration where I was thinking, what if there was a story where there was this epic battle between characters over here who kind of embodied like the 7 deadly sins, and over here you had these characters who embodied the fruits of the spirit, and what would those battles look like, and how would they fight, and what would control of the world look like on each side. And that's how it started, were these eternal beings who embodied these things. And one of the biggest challenges was it was extremely difficult to write a character who embodied one fruit of the spirit in a way that was super different than the other fruits of the spirit. How do you really write a character about gentleness who doesn't also like exude love? And so it got really difficult to make these different characters. And that's when I realized, okay, that half of the world that embodies the fruits of the spirit, they're probably just balanced people. They've got the fruits of the spirit in a balance. Like they've got all of them. Whereas it was very easy to write characters and create characters. It was really fun to create characters that embodied the 7 deadly sins. I did take some creative license with them and changed up some of those sins. It became more of a 7 downfalls of humanity from Maggie's perspective. Some of them are the deadly sins, some of them are not, and that's okay. I thought it would be kind of boring to have a character that embodied sloth. Kind of boring. So took some liberties there. For instance, there's one that really embodies bitterness, because I just think that is something that affects people so much, me included, when we get in that bitter space. And that's really a hard thing to get out of. And I think it shows that I'm not spiritually well when I'm bitter. And so there's now this world. They're not eternal beings. They're born, they die, and they are locked in some conflict. And there's a world that is pretty evil, and then the land down below in a valley of these just wonderful, weird people who live mostly happy lives. And then what happens when those communities intersect, primarily through the main character Tovi, who she's grown up in this happy valley community where they live in tree houses. And I mean, it's kind of like the world that I would love to live in. That's pretty much what that's modeled off of. And then she's faced with this choice to go experience this other world with all of these challenges. So that was the inspiration, and it's just taken me on this journey that I never could have foreseen, and it's been so fun to write and to work through my own faith as I've walked with Tovi through her own faith challenges. I could talk about my characters forever, so I'm going to try and keep this a little bit short, but I probably won't. So my very favorite character is a young man named Eryx, Eryx. So travel up to this evil kingdom. They live on the top of a mountain. There's a king called King Damien, and King Damien really values these young, up-and-coming young adults in his kingdom. He thinks they're really powerful and they have a lot of influence over other people. And so he's recruited 7 of them, 7 deadly sins, seven of these characters who each embody something that he finds really important on the mountain. And so he calls them masters of whatever their specialty is. And so Eric's is one of his masters. He is called a master of power. Their titles are supposed to, it makes their specialty sound positive, but when you really read between the lines, you know that it's not positive. So Eric's in our language would be like, his specialty is wrath. He just lives out hatred and wrath, but he's called a master of power instead, because, you know, power sounds like this like positive thing to them. And Eric's he's been through a lot, and he is tired of being awful. But he doesn't know any better way. And so he still goes through the motions of being this master of power, but he wants something different. And I cannot wait for him to find something different. But he's on a journey, and you get to see a lot of Eric's throughout the story. And you'll see what happens with him. And another favorite has to be my main character. Her name's Tovey, and she feels like she's never fit in. And that's kind of tropey in fantasy literature, and I know, but tropes are tropes for reasons, because we love them, right? And Tovey, she and her twin brother, Tolly, they were dropped off in this treehouse village when they were infants. And no one really knows where they came from. No one knows their story. All they know is that there are these 2 babies, and they're raised in this village. And Tovey's just on a journey of discovery, and she wants to know the God character's name is Adwin in this story. She wishes she knew him. She wishes she could find him. She feels just out, like she just doesn't even fit in her own skin, kind of a thing. She's just always really irritated and uncomfortable. And whereas her twin brother has assimilated to this valley beautifully, and he has friends, and he's happy, and he goes on adventures, and so she's just always, she loves her brother, she's jealous of her brother, and he is missing when we start the story. She is feeling the grief of her brother has been gone for several months, and so she feels even more out of place without him, and she doesn't know where he is. She suspects that he is on a mission for Adwin, but she doesn't know for sure. And so we get to watch her walk through just really hard things in the story, and come to an understanding of who Adwin is, and who he is to her, and who he's made her to be, and that's really special. Is it okay for me to say I don't have a least favorite character? I love my characters, and that sounds so weird to say. I'm not like bragging. It's like they're real people in my head, and I love them. Okay, that is not true. I absolutely hate the character Megara, but I like secretly kind of love her. She was really fun to write, but she is like really awful and evil. She is actually the master that embodies bitterness, but she's called a master of wisdom, and her life is just miserable. I would never want to be her. I don't want to embody anything of who she is. But yes, master of wisdom Megara, who is actually a master of bitterness and spreading bitterness in other people. She's awful. So yes, she's the least favorite, but was still really fun to write. Character that I relate to the most. There's a character in the story who she's very minor in the story, but her internal thinking is probably the character that is most like me in reality. And her name is BB. And she is a master. She's a brand new master. She is the master of prosperity, which is actually greed. And her older brother is also a master, and he is a very important character in the story. I can't tell you much. But BB just, she's doing what she thinks is right, but is just very misguided. And it reminds me a lot of who I was as a teenager. And I don't think I was necessarily super greedy, but when you read her thought processes and how badly she wants to do the right thing, even though she's misguided, it's just a lot of who I was before I knew Christ. And so I went ahead, just because I'm an author and I gave her dimples to be like me. But that's where our similarities really stop physically. So BB would be the one I relate to the most. My main hope as people read this story soon would be that whatever people need in their walk with Christ, whether they're just getting to know him or if they've already had a deep relationship for a long time, that it would just draw them closer to his heart. As I was writing it, God was using it in my life in really huge ways. He helped me process my faith through so many ups and downs of my journey through writing it. And so whatever people need out there, I hope someone is touched by it, that they are drawn closer to Christ's heart. That would be the goal. And it will be out and available for people to read on April 17th. Which is just wild. It's currently available for pre-order on Amazon. And so just go to Amazon, search Kingdom Above the Cloud or my name, Maggie Platt. And it's there for pre-order if you're interested in that. Right now it'll be Amazon. There will be a few other retailers as we get closer. And also if you want to follow my blog, very soon I'll be looking for a street team, a launch team to help me get the word out. So if that's something that any of you are interested in being a part of, I would love to have you. So get over to my blog. It's maggieplatt.com to follow along with the journey so that when that announcement comes out, the street team, you can jump on board. I'd love to have you. So yeah, I hope you'll read it. I hope you'll love it. Hope that you are just drawn closer to God as you read it. Again, thank you so much, Jenna, for having me. I'm sorry that it started getting really dark in my living room as I've completed this interview. But I'm just a big fan of you, Jenna, and hope the best for this series and hope you keep spreading the word about all this wonderful Christian fiction. So bye, everybody.
Thank you so much, Maggie, for coming onto my channel and sharing a little bit about yourself and your books and your writing and your journey. Your story is so incredible, and I just want to thank you so much for being willing to share it here with all of these people. I know that your experience will really help people and will really inspire people, so thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for appearing on my channel and doing this interview. If you guys would like to learn more about Maggie, all of her links and information will be in the description box below, as well as all of my links and information if you want to learn more about me. My name is Jenna Van Mourik. I'm an inspired writer and an inspirational fiction reader who reads, writes, and lives for Jesus. I love sharing all things Christian fiction and biblical fiction here on YouTube once a week with videos of my own, and as well as on Instagram every single day with Bookstagram inspired posts. I share videos of me talking about books and geeking out about Christian fiction and biblical fiction weekly here on YouTube, in addition to these weekly author interviews where I try to show you guys a little bit more of the inside look at the Christian fiction writing and publishing industry and get you guys some behind the scenes. And if you're a writer, give you guys some inspiration for your writing and some encouragement for your writing. Once again, you can find all of my links in the description box below. Thank you again so much for watching if you made it all the way through this interview, and I will see you guys in my next video. Thank you so much. Bye!